Most people living in suburban areas likely still take their safety for granted. We often think, this could never happen to me, or this only happens elsewhere. I used to share that same belief until one night when I discovered just how vulnerable we really are and how unaware we can be while comfortably going about our daily lives. It was a night I will never forget. I lived in a quiet neighborhood in a town not far from Boston. I rented a lovely two-story house, nestled in this peaceful area where everything seemed perfect. Calm, serene, and safe. It was the ideal place to enjoy the comforts of life. Then one afternoon around 4, I heard a knock on my door. It was my neighbor Linda, who I often called Lindy, standing with her young son Tommy. "They've mixed up the mail," Lindy said, smiling and pointing to Tommy, who was holding a small package roughly the size of half a shoebox. Tommy beamed, handing the package to me. "Here you go," he said with excitement, clearly thrilled that he had the task of delivering it. "Thank you, young man," I said, accepting the package from him. The shipping label clearly displayed my name and address. I couldn't help but smile as Tommy waved goodbye over his mom's shoulder. I waved back before closing the door. Inside, the package held a new digital voice recorder I had ordered online. It was an essential tool for my work as a multimedia editor. Eager to start using it, I set it up immediately. But it took longer than expected. Syncing it to my laptop and adjusting the settings was a bit more complicated than I had anticipated. Eventually, I managed to get it working. As summer was in full swing, I often left the windows and back doors open to let the fresh air inside. My house had two glass sliding doors, one in the kitchen and one in my office. These were the rooms I spent the most time in when I was home. After working with the recorder for a while, I grew tired and collapsed on the couch, listening to the sound of the wind and the rustling leaves outside. Before I knew it, I had fallen asleep. When I woke up, it was already dark. My phone displayed a time just past 10 o'clock. A frown spread across my face as I realized I had slept far too long. If I stayed asleep any longer, I wouldn't be able to get a good night's sleep later. I switched on the lights, closed the windows, and locked both sliding doors. As I was locking the kitchen door, I felt a slight chill in the night air. It was then that I heard a soft thud coming from upstairs, the office. Curious, I went upstairs to investigate and immediately noticed that a large, heavy dictionary I use frequently had fallen to the floor near my desk. It didn't seem like a big deal at first, and since nothing else appeared out of the ordinary, I decided to go back downstairs. But just as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze in place. The kitchen light was off. I distinctly remembered leaving it on when I locked the door earlier. Could I have forgotten to switch it off? Maybe, I thought, I had turned it off without realizing. To distract myself, I spent the next 15 to 20 minutes preparing a quick meal, trying to shake off the unease. But when I sat down to eat, something even stranger happened. My voice recorder was gone. Panic surged through me as I checked the coffee table, under the cushions, and all around the kitchen counter. But it was nowhere to be found. Frustrated, I thought maybe I had absent-mindedly taken it upstairs. I went back to the office to look again. Of course, it wasn't there either. Irritated, I decided to hold off on searching further until I finished my meal and watched the rest of my show. Another half hour passed. After finishing my food, I carried my plate and cup back to the kitchen. Just as I was about to leave, I froze once again. The kitchen light had gone out. Initially, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there was an issue with the wiring or the switch. But when I checked, I was certain of one thing. The light switch was turned off. I had clearly left it on. So why was it off again? The unsettling feeling in my stomach grew as I turned to face the rest of the house, realizing with dread that something was very wrong. It was a peaceful evening in my home, or so I thought. Little did I know that night would change everything in the most terrifying way imaginable. I had just returned home after a long day, feeling the exhaustion settle in, but something in the air felt off. There was this overwhelming sense that I was being watched. Every tiny sound seemed to be amplified, echoing in the silence. I couldn't shake the feeling. Standing still for a moment, I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but my heart was racing. I had to calm down, so I forced myself to focus on something normal. I flicked on the kitchen light, and began placing the dishes into the sink, attempting to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Just as I finished and was about to return to my office, something caught my attention. The kitchen light. It was still on. I was certain I had turned it off before I left the room. Confused and increasingly unsettled, I tried to distract myself. I grabbed the remote to watch my favorite show, hoping to forget the growing tension in the air. But then it happened. The room felt suddenly heavier, the silence unbearable. I could hear it, that deep, slow wheezing sound. Breathing, but not my own. Not human. It felt like it was coming from all around me, resonating from the corners of the room. That's when it hit me. Something was terribly wrong. I froze. My eyes darted around the room, desperately trying to locate the source of the sound. Then I saw it, a flicker of light, moving. It led me to the sliding door of my office. My breath caught in my throat. The door was slightly ajar, and there, lying next to the door, was my voice recorder, inexplicably making those horrifying, breath-like sounds. Panic surged through me, and my body was trembling uncontrollably. I knew I had to get out. I bolted for the front door, but as my hand touched the doorknob, something stopped me dead in my tracks. A figure stood in the entryway. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Tall, almost unnaturally so, with skin as white as paper and sickly gray. The figure's head was too small, almost bulbous, like a grotesque onion. Its eyes were dark, empty, black, piercing through me as if it could see right into my soul. And that smile, stretched wide from ear to ear, was something out of a nightmare. Jagged, yellowed teeth gleamed in the dim light, and I could feel its twisted pleasure in watching me tremble. It was savoring my fear. In its hand, it held a rusted, sharp metal object, the kind of thing you would expect from a nightmare. As we locked eyes, I knew that my time was running out. I had only moments before I lost control of my senses. A scream tore from my throat, and I ran toward the sliding door, pushing it open and sprinting into the backyard. I didn't even think. I just jumped over the fence, running for my life. Out of breath, I hammered on the back door of my neighbor's house, praying someone would help me. When Kim finally opened the door, I collapsed inside, shaking, pleading for her to call the police. Her husband, Barry, rushed over, trying to calm me down as I relayed the horror I had just experienced. He insisted on checking my house himself, but I begged him to wait for the police. When they arrived, I felt a little relief until they confirmed my worst fear. My house was empty, no creature, no sign of anything unusual. The officers were skeptical, but after a thorough search of the house, they assured me everything was fine. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. One of the officers casually remarked, "This is why we always tell people to lock their doors at night." Kim and Barry offered for me to stay the night, but I refused. My heart was still pounding, and my mind was racing. I asked Barry to walk through the house one last time to be absolutely sure there was no one hiding. The house felt secure, and the night seemed to settle into an uneasy calm. A few glasses of wine later, I finally started to relax. I decided to take a warm bath, hoping it would soothe my nerves. As I sank into the water, my mind swirled with thoughts of what had happened. Just as I finally began to doze off, feeling a small sense of peace, the unthinkable happened. A deafening crash echoed through the house, and I shot up, heart hammering in my chest. It was far from over. The door I had left slightly ajar suddenly jerked open with a violent force. My heart raced, my pulse pounding in my ears as I screamed and pressed myself against the wall. Was it back? Was I truly safe? I will never forget the night that almost shattered my sanity. What began as a calm, peaceful evening in my small, quiet home in a secluded village turned into an unimaginable nightmare I can't erase from my mind. It all began innocently, with nothing out of the ordinary. But when I heard that sound, everything changed. Right outside the bathroom door, a deep, scraping noise echoed through the walls, sending waves of ice through my veins. It sounded as though something sharp, metallic, was being dragged across the floor. My heart leapt into my throat, and the knot in my stomach twisted painfully. Then I heard it, the same guttural breaths I had earlier on a recording, except this time, they were much closer. I froze, paralyzed. My body shook uncontrollably, and my hands and legs trembled with a fear so intense it felt suffocating. I curled up into a fetal position, desperately trying to make myself as small as possible. Whoever, or whatever, was on the other side of that door was still there, lurking. It had somehow managed to slip past the exhaustive searches conducted by the authorities only hours before. My mind couldn't process it. Was this real? Was I trapped in this terrifying scenario with nothing but a flimsy wooden door separating me from whatever was out there? The pounding of my heart was deafening. The air felt thick, like I was suffocating. The breathing, deep and rasping, continued for what felt like an eternity, only to suddenly stop. Silence. The absence of sound was almost more terrifying than the noise. I couldn't hear anything. Not a footstep, not a creak in the floorboards. Nothing. I didn't dare to make a sound or move a muscle. I sat frozen, my eyes glued to the door, too terrified to even blink. As the hours dragged on, the first light of dawn began to filter through the small bathroom window. Still, I didn't move. I waited, feeling the oppressive darkness slowly lift with the arrival of the day. When the light grew strong enough, I finally dared to peek through the crack beneath the door. My heart hammered in my chest. With a trembling breath, I looked down at the empty hallway. But relief was fleeting. The nightmare was far from over. Suddenly, my phone rang downstairs. The sound startled me, but it also stirred something in me. Gathering every ounce of courage I had left, I grabbed a pair of scissors for protection and cautiously stepped into the hallway. The house was unnervingly silent. I moved toward my bedroom, my pulse still racing, and glanced at the clock on the wall. It was just past 11 in the morning. The phone rang again, a few more times before going silent. But there was something off, something unsettling about the way the calls had come. Someone had been trying desperately to reach me. I walked to my wardrobe to grab a shirt when something caught my eye on the floor. My stomach churned. A small figure, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, lay motionless. The blanket was tied tightly with string and wire. A dark pool of blood had soaked through the fabric, making it stick to the floor. As I slowly peeled back the fabric, my blood ran cold. The face that emerged, though disfigured beyond recognition, was unmistakable. And then, loud, sharp knocks on the door downstairs shattered the silence. My heart stopped in my chest. Hesitantly, I descended the stairs, dread filling my every step. The door was unlocked. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle, and when I opened it, I was met with a face I recognized all too well. It was Emma, her face pale, eyes red and streaked with tears. Her expression, frozen in terror, told me everything I needed to know. She spoke through sobs, her voice trembling with fear. What she said will haunt me forever. "Michael's gone. We put him to bed last night and now he's gone. Please, do you know where he is?" I stood there frozen in shock, the gravity of her words sinking in. She had called me desperately hoping I had some answer, but I didn't. My mind raced, spinning in disbelief as her cries rang in my ears. What if Michael had been taken by whatever dark force had infiltrated my home? What if this was all connected? The police later found Michael's body in my house. It was unrecognizable, so badly disfigured that they needed dental records to identify him. Naturally, I was arrested. I became the prime suspect in the murder of the child. But after further investigation and my testimony, all charges against me were dropped. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong, and the truth was still out there, lurking just beyond my reach. I thought I had escaped the nightmare. But as I returned to my home that evening, the weight of the past came crashing down. In the kitchen, there it was, sitting innocently on the table, a voice recorder. I hadn't seen it in years, not since that terrifying night that twisted everything I thought I knew about fear. But now, as I stood before it, the years of silence felt like a cruel joke. I had completely forgotten about the recorder after that night. It was just a piece of equipment I had received, used once, and shoved to the back of my mind as I tried to block out the horrors I had experienced. But today, something felt different. The recorder's presence felt oddly heavy, almost as if it was calling me to remember. I couldn't help myself. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. A strange chill ran through me, and for a moment I hesitated. But then I pressed play, unsure of what I was about to hear. The static was the first thing that hit me, a thick, oppressive crackling that filled the speakers. My heart pounded in my chest as I braced myself for the noise. But then, between the chaos of distortion, there was a sound. It was a voice, low and strained, like a distant wheeze that came from something or someone far beyond the normal realm. I recognized it instantly. It was the same entity that haunted me that night, the same presence I couldn't shake. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I listened. Then the voice spoke, and it froze me in place. "I am here." Those words sent a chill straight to my bones. I had to replay them. My mind was reeling, but the answers didn't come. Why? Why now, after all this time? And more importantly, what was it? But even after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real killer, or whatever that thing was still out there, lurking. It haunted my thoughts, my every waking moment. I couldn't help but wonder, was that creature somehow drawn to me? Or was Kyle just an unfortunate pawn in some twisted game? A game meant to torment me? The terrifying events that unfolded that night and the next day left deep scars on my soul, triggering a constant paranoia that has never quite left me. I moved away from that house shortly after everything happened. I haven't seen Kim or Barry since. I often wonder if I ever will, but every time I think of them, I can feel their pain in my heart. I can't help but ask myself, did they know? Did they know that the terror had already crept inside their home, even before it reached their doorstep? The pain of that night still lingers, and the voice on the recorder only makes it worse. It's as if the terror is waiting just around the corner, ready to pounce again. And the worst part? I can't shake the feeling that it's far from over. What do you think? Am I just losing my mind, or is there something truly sinister still lurking? Something that will never let go of me, no matter how far I run.